Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Wolfson, the host and founder of Web3 Deep Dive Podcast. Web3 Deep Dive Podcast focuses on real-world Web3 use cases to help you better understand how Web3 is being applied today and how it may be leveraged in the future. If this sounds interesting, I encourage you to subscribe, like, and share the content that you're seeing today to help spread the word about Web3. Hey everyone, welcome back to this episode of Web3 Deep Dive. I'm so excited for today's guest. Today I'll be speaking with Michelle Munson. She is the CEO and co-founder of Eluvio, and we're going to be speaking all about Web3 in the film and media and entertainment industry. Hi Michelle, how are you?
Hi Rachel, I'm great, and thank you so much for having me today.
Of course, my pleasure, Michelle. You know, as we were just talking about, I think I met you a few years ago in person at South by Southwest in Austin. So I'm so happy to have you on the show today.
It's wonderful to be with you. And I do remember that. That's when Web3 was really just getting started.
Yeah, so we've come a long way in the past 2 years. Before we dig into the topic of Web3, I would like for you to tell our listeners a little bit about your background and what you do and talk a little bit about Eluvio.
Oh, for sure. Well, I have a long journey through the internet. I've been working in content at scale over the internet my whole career since grad school, actually. And back in the day, this will kind of date me, streaming was just getting started. My first job, actually, after I finished my master's, went to, first of all, my undergrad degrees in electrical engineering physics. I went to grad school in computer science, and then I came to the Bay Area. I got a job at a startup early on that was working in application layer multicast. And back in the day, this was a new idea for scaling streaming over the internet. And at that time, there were very few streams. In fact, having even a few thousand streams was considered kind of large. It was before the days that we all think of our large-scale streaming services. And it was also before the internet was really ready for all of this. I had the opportunity through a few startups to ultimately come into my own idea to create a bulk data transfer protocol that became my first company, Aspera. And that, in straightforward terms, means essentially a mechanism and application software to provide high throughput, high speed transfer of big data. And so became my introduction to media. That technology was used a lot in high-speed file transfer throughout the media supply chain. And if you really think back to the way things were done in the early 2000s, companies started to do streaming at scale. iTunes was one of the first. They were actually our first really high-profile customer at Aspera. And at that time, moving these heavy files around was part of the back end, if you will, for getting these streaming services launched. And over the course of 10 years or so, for better or for worse, I learned a lot about what goes into video over the internet. And at the tail end of Aspera, we ultimately grew and sold that company. And myself and Shaban Sumu, the other co-founder of Eluvio, we had been introduced to content native networks, which is something maybe we'll talk about. And we also were a lot older and more ambitious, and thought that maybe we could do something more foundational for video at scale over the internet that would be quite clean slate. And then we also had a real fondness for blockchains. At that time, it was mostly a curiosity because this was 2017 when we were first thinking of the concepts, and that was when the Ethereum yellow paper first came out. I can remember that summer reading that vividly, and first of all, like everybody, just trying to get my head around what Vitalik was talking about, and then from there starting to think about how we would apply that into this content native network, which we had a lot of original ideas for because that's sort of our background, and I can talk to that with Eluvio. But the long and the short of it is, fast forward, 5.5 years later, we ended up creating a decentralized protocol for content. It's content natively routed. It allows for streaming, storage, and all types of serving at scale. And it's also a full stack blockchain. So it brings together both worlds of content and blockchains.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Let's unpack that because that's quite a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah, and actually, maybe I knew, but maybe I'm just forgetting. I didn't realize Eluvio was its own blockchain network, which is really interesting.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
I was going to say there's an idea in the architecture of blockchain protocols of sort of application-specific blockchains, and I know that's a little more academic, but I think that's really what the Content Fabric is. We took a fork of Ethereum, standard Ethereum, and then created a protocol that uses the blockchain mechanics to govern the life cycle of the content. It also controls for the encryption and the authorization. So we have built an application-specific blockchain that also happens to be full stack. I guess people call those layer ones, but the purpose of this, instead of providing for, let's say, transactional settlement for DeFi, for example, the point of the Content Fabric is to provide for blockchain governance over the life cycle of content storage, management, and streaming ownership.
Okay, interesting. So how is the Eluvio blockchain being applied and used today?
Today,
I recently, yes, because I recently got a press release saying, the Flash Web3 movie. I want you to talk about that, but I guess, answer my first question, how it's being used today.
Yeah, today. So fast forward to today, that we're really excited about this. There was actually a new release feature film from Warner Brothers released through the Fabric on chain. Users own it by owning the NFT that's associated with the film and the bundle, and the entire experience is basically served through the Fabric. So it's the first time, if you want to really cut to the chase, it's an NFT window on theatrical digital release. So first streaming release on a blockchain. And this took, to your point about South by Southwest 2 years ago, as I'm sure lots of your listeners have experienced, the whole space around content, media, NFTs has evolved so much over the last couple of years. And we're really excited that, even with the challenges of all the crypto markets, that we've arrived at this spot where basically this is media ownership and experience that is on chain.
Okay. Let's talk about that. So with this movie, is it called The Flash?
It's The Flash, yeah.
Okay.
It's the actual, the Flash feature film from Warner Brothers. And it's also minted along with a whole bundle of extra content. So the feature film in full 4K, as well as a lot of back footage, special scenes of making of the film, and director's cuts, for example, plus also collectibles and an interactive experience. And all of that, the creative is credit to WB. We, Eluvio, just serve and make possible the experience. But I think what they're really going after is two things. One is to be able to embrace this form of technology to have a new type of collectible. It used to be in the old days that you would have to collect physical discs or DVDs and build up your library if you were really a fan, a deep fan of the experience. So that's one thing, really modernizing this idea of ownership and collectability of high value IP, in this case, films. The second piece that I think is also really pushing the envelope, and this is the first time anything like this has been done, is to utilize the blockchain authorization capability to enforce a global streaming window. That's what film releases are sort of characterized by. And in this case, the Flash is streamable on the same schedule globally by the Flash NFT owners as it is if you were to go on to, say, Apple TV and watch it. In fact, so if you're in Norway, you just got to start watching on July 29th through your Flash NFT. And then finally, this is also a little mind-bending, but it's quite, I think, important to the whole experience. We brought our media wallet to the connected TVs. Apple TV to start. We're just about to release it for Chromecast and Fire Stick, and the Amazon connected TV. And what this means is the user who owns one of the Flash Movieverse NFTs can sign on to their wallet, and there they click into a big card poster-like view that is that owned item, and inside of that they can unfold all the media and actually watch any of these parts, including the feature film. And that's what has brought it to basically entertainment in full form. So it's also novel because it's a direct distribution. It's literally, in this case, the studio to the fan. We aren't a licensee in the classic sense of, licensing the content and then, reselling it or offering a subscription to the user. Instead, the user has a license through their NFT ownership to the streamability of the content. And this is a great use of the content fabric because it's sort of built for this sort of thing, high performance 4K streaming under the authorization control of tokenized assets, for example.
Yeah, wow. It's so interesting because this is probably going to be the next, like you said, instead of a Blu-ray or DVD, now people can own content NFTs of films. And then, as you mentioned, have that for, hopefully one day on Netflix and Amazon and Apple and Fire Stick and all that in their digital wallet online. That's right. And everything's accessible in there. That's amazing.
Well, I think it is, and it also brings to the whole content space the power of blockchains, right? I mean, there's never before been a technology that lets users have that kind of digital scale of direct control. And then I think the other part, Rachel, that I'm really excited about is the creative space is wide open. I mean, this is the kind of thing that you can use for any type of creative work, be it, not just films, but things like interactive experiences and also music, for example, TV and live streams, for example. And it really does open up, I think, a direct relationship between the creator, the publisher, and the audience. One other thing I want to mention and I really give full credit to WB. I mean, they're the ones that create all the creative work. Again, we're just the platform serving it, but they also had the idea to use a on-chain feature we have for redeemable offers. And those can bring to the user, like a digital coupon, a ability to, in their wallet, redeem and get something. In this case, they had a DC comic that the users could, digital comic that the users can redeem for. And they also had a coupon for FanFlix, another movie site. That experience is unique to the wallet, meaning only the wallet holder has it. It becomes part of the assets, if you will, that are part of the NFT bundle. And then also, if you think about sort of fan engagement and being able to really pair up from the publisher to the fan, those offers don't have to be static. New ones can be added over time. So you can really start to build people call it super fan, but a really direct relationship with the people who really care. And then the redemption is an on-chain transaction. So, the user controls it, and also the publisher can know that it's happened. So you have a proof of engagement there too that's really different from what we think of as social media, where you stick the big social platform in the middle of it all, right? So.
Right, yeah, of course, because the whole peer-to-peer aspect of blockchain technology takes away that middleman, which nowadays it's social media. And then you don't even, I just feel like brands that are leveraging social media, they also don't get those valuable insights anyways from their consumers. They don't know who their consumers are because there's that third-party gatekeeper. So blockchain technology seems to be like such a good solution here.
Also with privacy, I did want to, you may have explored this on some of your other podcasts. One of the things that really sticks out, and it's fresh in my mind because we've done submissions recently to all of these app stores with the wallet. The typical model, of course, is to collect all this data on the user, and then you have to have these hundreds of disclosures, in a standard app as to everything you're collecting on the person, and the current privacy situation is really bent backwards. And the great thing about the wallet model, as folks know in the Web3 space and in even coming directly out of crypto, is that that's yours. And first of all, it's at least pseudo-anonymous, meaning that you don't have to attach any identifying information to your wallet, and yet you can still have, full transactional provability of what you've done. You don't have to have any of your identifying information with it. And then also with the latest technologies like zero knowledge, you could make it utterly private and still have that proof of engagement, which is, I just feel like this is such a fantastic sort of step forward for consumer privacy, combined with being able to voluntarily establish these good engagement links between publishers and audience, right?
Yeah, definitely. I've got so many questions for you, Michelle, but let me start off with this one that's fresh in my mind because I'm curious. Yeah. So how does one go about purchasing a content NFT, and how did they know, how did they know about the Flash movie having an NFT associated with it? Totally.
It's such a great question. Well, first of all, it's easy to get in terms of the Flash itself. Warner Brothers runs a website, web3.wb.com, and that has a series of stores on it, and you can purchase the Lord of the Rings, the Superman, and the Flash movie experiences. And when you purchase those, you sign on to a wallet. The wallet is authorizing you, giving you an address on the Eluvio Content Fabric. It's a full EVM wallet. You can connect with MetaMask as well, since it's a full EVM chain. And then from there, you purchase a mint. And it's that part of our software is intentionally designed to try to be open to all kinds of users. It has credit card checkout as well as native crypto payments. It's pretty fast and smooth. That's one of the, I think, great features of it, and the minting happens on demand. And what you end up with in your wallet, which is now also on the TV, so you can go get the Eluvio Media Wallet, for example, on the tvOS store on your Apple TV. Like I was saying, we're just about to put it out on Google Play as well, right, for example, and Amazon store. When you do that, you sign on the same way. So you sign on with the same credential that you use to purchase the NFT. That credential can be email, Google ID, Apple ID, or MetaMask. And when you sign on, there you have your NFT bundle, and that NFT bundle includes a whole gallery of media, including the feature film and interactive experience, these redeemable offers, all the back footage, some 3D collectibles. In this case, all of that media is authorized and minted under the control of a single NFT contract, ERC 721. But that can be mixed and matched. Some of our other publishers choose to unbundle those things and maybe have one item that is authorized. And the nice thing about this is it really makes at least I think the user experience is important, because it really makes it seamless to both have the NFT and to enjoy all the media and stream it and directly out of the wallet.
Right, and own it, because
exactly.
Today, today we have, I watch Netflix all the time, and, I get that content, but I'm not owning it. Even if I go on Amazon and buy one of the movies,
That's right.
I'm not actually owning it. It's not in a digital wallet.
That's right.
And so this is really interesting, because it's you can actually own those 3 movies that you mentioned, right?
That's right. And I think the other thing people sometimes don't realize is, if you look behind the scenes, not only do you as the user not own it, the publisher basically sets up this revenue share with the streaming platform, which is aggressively in favor of the streaming platform, as I'm sure you can imagine. And so everybody's basically, and this is, it's maybe an extreme position, but it's true that the audience and the publisher end up subject to this verticalized streaming platform, right? Whereas this model is publisher to fan, and the fan owns what they have. And the other thing I would say, when you really dig into it, is your ownership is something that can't be taken away. It's as good as your wallet ownership is on the chain itself, and it's quite, I think, important to the reasons you stated. I also think it's interesting when you think about new models for being part of a community and a fan group. I mean, we know this so well from Web3 that users can then not only own, but potentially resell. And then also there are other I think sort of inherent incentive mechanisms that can become part of just owning into this, such as being authorized to contribute back feedback or have early access to other things. The Flash, the Lord of the Rings, the Superman NFTs are all tradable on a secondary marketplace. And then also, I know in WB, I don't think is an exception to this. WB pays very close attention to the fact that all of this fan group is also specially identified. These are voluntarily identified fans who might be interested in other things WB has. So they can make exclusive offers and then condition that on the fact that users own these assets from the Movieverse, right? And again, the blockchain NFT ownership or token ownership makes it easy to do those kinds of things, right?
Right. I also wanted to ask you, and if you can answer this, that's great. If not, it's okay.
Sure, no problem.
What was it like working with WB? Are they excited about blockchain, or are they hesitant? Are they confused? Like I'm just
a big
so
company.
Curious.
Sure, yeah. So a couple of notes. First of all, I mean it in all sincerity. Warner Brothers is very innovative. This is a company that's literally pushing the envelope of this space. They're the ones who came to us and said, we've seen your technology, we see what it can do, we want to try this new idea. And also I will say the other part that is, I think, quite standout is that they put a ton of effort into the creative. These movie releases aren't just let's just throw the feature film into an NFT. They have such a curation in terms of everything they build around it. The interactive experiences themselves are created from scratch to accompany the movie. They serve as a 3D interactive with hotspots and whatnot. Each is built uniquely for the experience, and I'm seeing that, to your question, behind the scenes, and all the effort that goes into it is really impressive, not to mention curating all the back, photography, image galleries, and extra footage. Finally, also, they go back and work with the original creators of these franchises. Think of Peter Jackson with Lord of the Rings, for example. These are extremely high value. DC, in the case of the new release of Flash, these are really high value franchises. And I think the other piece that is important here, which is, this is kind of a first of a kind, but it really matters to blockchain, is taking into account the actual original creators of the IP. And we're not yet settling mutual payments on chain, like split royalties with, in this case, a Movieverse. We do have the capability to do that here at Eluvio, and I know that this is already being discussed at Warner Brothers, and I think this is why I feel like, to your point, even though a large company and more traditional in Hollywood, they are really embracing the space and testing everything that they think can be useful to their fans and into the future. Lastly, DC has a really good Web3 presence. You might have followed that yourself. I think they've stuck it through the ups and downs of the market, and they have DC comic releases, which they started off, probably a year or so ago, and we've been lucky to partner together with that project. That project is actually with Palm, I believe.
Palm NFT, yeah.
Yes, and
I remember meeting them.
Yeah, and we did a but 2 movies. We've done cross-chain offers, which I think is super cool. We did a DC Comics offer in Superman and another one in the Flash. And the users, one of the 2 offers in the Flash lets users claim an NFT with one of those comics. And the reason I'm bringing this up is you asked about what's the commitment, what's the curiosity, what's really going on in the studio. I think all of this together, it speaks for itself. It's an extremely high degree of dedication to really pursue what's possible. The biggest problem, you haven't asked me this yet, but this
right.
is the real rub. It's difficult for WB, it's difficult for us, I'm sure it's difficult for Palm. How do you get the awareness out there? This is brand new. First of all, podcasts like this help a ton, but people don't know that this format exists. And like all new internet phenomena, that's the big thing, is to really get people understanding that, first of all, it's possible, that the thing is even there, finding it, discovery, and then I think also is making sure that there is enough education that, to these great points you're making, people know the difference. Like, what does this really mean for me?
For sure, because I knew about it because I'm a journalist. I got the press release. I wouldn't have known about it otherwise. Exactly. However, I will say I really, really, really wish there was a Barbie movie NFT, because I know, wasn't WB behind? They're behind the Barbie movie, right? And I mean,
I agree with you.
Like, talk about getting the word out there. That would have been perfect. Everybody knows the Barbie movie.
So, and you know what's interesting, Rachel, on this is, I think I'm not an expert in culture and consumer, pulse, right? But I do think, to your point, this. One of the important market tests is to understand what type of media people would be interested in this format. And my hope is everything, right? But I think, to your point, the giant success phenomena that Barbie has been kind of showcases that this, could become a new form of a release window for ownership. And I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility based on what's being discussed.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's exciting. Cool. I also want to talk a little bit about, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about Eluvio and maybe the security behind the platform, because with ownership of NFTs, security is obviously extremely important. We've seen hacks and all these problems happen in the crypto space. So how can users that own those NFTs be sure that everything in those wallets are safe and secure in theirs always?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And just a little bit of internet context. Back in the early days of streaming, eons ago when I started, it was very scammy then too. In fact, sadly, the biggest customers you could get were porn. And it's not to say that there isn't an audience for that, but the mainstream took a bit. And I think that technology can play a very key role here. And for your listeners, Content Fabric, that's one thing I'll say on our behalf, is very rigorous, meaning that when you publish content this way, it really is verified and life-cycled on-chain. And let me say what that means. First of all, everything that's published is encrypted with the owner keys, and blockchain folks know what that means. It means that you've got private keys as an owner that govern the encryption of the content and all of its component parts as they're spread throughout that network, which means that you really don't have to trust any of the nodes that run the Fabric protocol, because the content is self-encrypted and safe that way. That's number one. Number two thing is that there's what we think of as a publishing and update and even access cycle that happens for the content. The content objects have all these constituent parts with that encryption. That life cycle ties back to the version hash, which is basically a fingerprint of all the parts that make up the bytes in the content itself. And that version hash is committed on-chain. It's committed to a smart contract. You asked me how we got into Ethereum. Well, our main inspiration was to utilize Ethereum design principles and smart contracts to be able to record that version hash of the content so that it's provable. And then the most important idea, which goes well beyond static storage, like you would think of IPFS and even encryption, is that version hash itself, anything that content object can create in terms of a dynamic output, is authorized. And this is a very important idea, is authorized when the request is made against a policy that's part of the object. It's data, and it also feeds into that version hash. And that authorization is also tied in with the re-encryption of the content to the recipient's key space, right? And that one idea comes purely from blockchain crypto. If you kind of dig into how cryptography has changed over the last 5 years, there's a whole area of it which allows for peer-to-peer re-encryption, proxy re-encryption, that doesn't reveal any of the keys or the plain text of the software doing it. And we utilize that proxy re-encryption when a fan, for example, is getting playout of those parts. And that re-encryption process doesn't have to trust any of the Fabric software, and it doesn't have to trust the key management. And finally, the most important thing for the fan is when they're getting that, the re-encryption is specifically for them and their wallet. So you have this life cycle of over the content itself that is tied to what the content is, that version hash. It's controlled through the blockchain contract and the authorization policy, which in this case requires you own the requisite NFT, you be in the window that Warner Brothers has set. And then also it's finally implemented through controlling the re-encryption or decryption of the content so you can see it and view it. Finally, I know this is a lot, but it's also tied into the DRM, the digital rights management, because that last step of re-encryption is actually re-encrypting to the DRM key space for the user's player. And DRM is classic digital rights management built into all of our standard playout devices and browsers like FairPlay, Apple FairPlay, and Google Widevine, for example. So that big amass that I just described in terms of that cycle of the content is what ensures that if I publish something and you go buy it or buy the authorization to have access to its streamability, that only you, someone, a legitimate buyer, can do that, first and foremost, and that what you're getting from me is verifiably what I published, right? And there can't be any man-in-the-middle tampering or piracy or any of the other stuff that we would worry about in high-value content. I know it's a lot to digest in terms of the whole of it, but that's what makes it real. And kind of like contrasting that, with what's been going on with a lot of NFT content. If you don't have all of that coupling, let's say you have the NFT over here and the content over here on Amazon Cloud, for example, or even IPFS, that join up is not tightly linked enough to prevent people from being able to just go and get the content who don't necessarily have ownership of the requisite blockchain asset or token. And that's the problem. It's too easy with much of what's been done with NFTs and media to be able to steal the content or to put up something that's fake, for example, right? And one of the things our platform safeguards against is doing any of that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know, from that conversation I was reminded, I have my Dolly Parton NFT on the Eluvio blockchain. That was the one
of our first projects.
Yeah, that was, I remember at South by Southwest 2 years ago, Dolly Parton performed. I was fortunate enough to see it, which was, it was incredible. And I got the NFT, and I guess it's still in my wallet.
You still have it, that's right. So that was a live stream, first time we've ever done a major live stream this way, and then it was ticketed on the blockchain, and then we had also adjunct NFTs for her album, Run Rose Run, and that also helped to get this all going because, well, a major star doing something like that sure shows people what's possible. And in truth, I ended up giving a tech talk at a conference a few months after that, just about this idea of the content fabric and on-chain authorization and ownership, and that's what led to the Movieverse project at Warner Brothers. They heard the talk, and there you go. So, as things go, right?
Yeah, interesting, because I was going to ask you, what's changed over the years, in terms of the technology, or why all of a sudden do Warner Brothers want to implement this? But I guess,
yes,
you kind of answered that question. They heard about it for your talk and got interested.
But getting easier to use. And I think here's something, we all know this in Web3, that mainstream is everything. And it's been really hard for Web3 to make it into the mainstream. For our own selves, we put a lot of effort the last 2 years into making a seamless wallet experience that makes everything work really easily and has all the payment forms people want and is robust. And then finally getting on the TV. That is really the breakthrough on the entertainment side. And I think as we go forward, all of the use cases we're involved in are making let's call it the blockchain ownership more and more seamless and behind the scenes. And the streaming and the creative experience more and more foreground, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, quick question. With Eluvio, can this also be applied to different types of content? Music. I mean, I guess Dolly Parton, that was an example of music,
Absolutely.
but let's explain that a little bit more. It's not just film.
Videos.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, so any type of content can be published into the fabric, and it's so basically this fabric that I'm talking about, it's a giant decentralized network based on an open protocol that we created. That protocol runs on the nodes, and then the nodes can they all participate together in order to support publishing of content and output streaming of the content, downloads of the content, viewing of the content, and it's a fully fledged global CDN. Content delivery network. It's also a full media stack in that protocol. So to your point, you can publish any kind of media. It can be music, audio, albums, long form video, short clips, live streams. And because it's a full stack, you don't have to bring along other stuff. So you don't need a Vimeo, you don't need your cloud like a cloud storage. You also don't need a CDN. And that's one of the things that's really helping us, and I think we can bring to, if you have creators listening in here, big and small, is that it's very automatic. When you publish, the content is automatically available to users, and all those controls I talked about are just part of the way it works. Right?
Definitely. And I want to elaborate a little bit on one topic because, so we've talked a little bit about the incentives for fans. You know, for instance, I have the Dolly Parton NFT. I'm assuming I can sell that on some secondary marketplace if I want. You know, there are all of these benefits, but let's talk about the incentives and benefits for creators. You know, did Dolly Parton have some sort of incentive by using the Eluvio blockchain or the Flash, the people involved with the movie?
Why would they want to do this? I think the number one big arc reason is to get out from underneath the middle guy, right? You said it earlier on. The way the whole current content economy has been set up is there are these giant middle layers that are really using the content to get other value. And I don't have to tell people who the middle layers are. They're the biggest streaming platforms, right? Most of them use the content to sell something else to people, right? Amazon sells Prime subscriptions, Apple sells devices and everything else to us, right? And in the case of something like Netflix, it's all their subscriptions, right? So basic, most important motivator for the publisher is that the middle guy goes away. You take back the value of your content 100%. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have this secondary thing, and this is the thing I really want to say to people and users, is if you think one layer deeper, this is why I mentioned privacy. The fan is really deciding then what they're consuming. They're not just drinking from this passive shelf of content, right, that they've signed up for in their subscription. Instead, they are deliberately engaging with what they're interested in. And I think that's the blockchain power, and it's the very same power people have with DeFi, which is you get to go and decide what you're going to engage with, and you know how that data is going to be used, you know what data is there about you, and then I think also you get these new kinds of positive cycles that can form between publishers and their fans. Fans can deliberately spend more on stuff they love, and they can also promote and share it, and you can also start to change advertising so that the sponsors are really relating to people who actually love certain content, not just spraying out their ad buy over Google AdWords, right?
Yeah. So I want to ask you another question about owning the content. So when people think of NFTs, a lot of the mainstream may think NFTs are very expensive. I could never afford an NFT because we hear, about the Bored Apes of the world and, selling for, hundreds of thousands.
Lots of money.
Yeah, lots of money. So are the NFTs like the Flash NFT, for instance, was that expensive?
No, they're priced like a movie, and I think that's the difference. Is that in these cases you get best way I try to think about it is you have a new way to own the asset, and it's priced like the asset itself. So the Flash, for example, just like Lord of the Rings and Superman, is two tiers. One's $100, the other one's around $30, and the $100 is meant for the collectible with a lot of extra stuff in it, and it gets all of these extras. But if you think about the root of your question, right, the point is to price the good, not the NFT. And I think that's really leaning into where all of this can go. And I think also this is important for the blockchain ecosystem, because we have been stuck over an NFT world where the reason to get the NFT was to flip it, not to to get the thing that the NFT codifies your ownership for, the product, right? So.
Definitely, yeah. We need to start thinking about NFTs less about financialization and more about real world use cases, which is what I love about this.
And to your point, it doesn't mean there wouldn't be collector's items that can become a very high value. You said something really interesting about Barbie. I happened to see something where some clothing that was like Barbie had suddenly skyrocketed on an eBay thing, and I was like, but that's the right reason, right? Because people want to have it, like, typical collectible markets. I think to this broader point, what we're really trying to enable is the fact that the price goes along with the good, whatever it is, as opposed to just being only flip it collectibles, right?
Right. I mean, if somebody's going to buy this new version of a DVD or a Blu-ray, we don't want to spend $100,000 on it. We want it to be affordable so we can enjoy it. But then there are also those fun incentives that, you have it.
Sometime you might have this special thing, or you might own the antique or what have you. I think that's also it. And then the other thing is accessibility. and that's probably my bias as an engineer, but, we want to make things that the whole world can use. That we're not interested in making things that appeal or are accessible to a very small set of people. What good is that, right? And I think this is a great opening time for the whole blockchain space, that since we're getting away from what was a year ago and such hype and overpriced everything, that it starts to maybe get it more accessible to everybody, right?
Definitely more accessible, and also you mentioned this in the beginning about education.
Easier. And safer.
Right, safer, because, obviously the NFT space doesn't have the best reputation because of what we've seen happen over the past year with the crypto market. But people need to understand that blockchain technology is separate from cryptocurrency, and there are these real world use cases. And NFTs are just digital assets that live on the blockchain. We don't have to call them NFTs. We can say digital assets, or like digital, I don't know, DVDs, Blu-rays, whatever. But at the end of the day, like, the terminology of Web3 is NFT, and people just need to understand that that's okay.
Yeah, well, and also I think maybe this comes from just being in tech so long, but I just feel that every new technology always has malignant use cases, let's put it that way. And I think it's a natural sign of the adoption curve to be able to work through those and whatnot. The part of what we're talking about that I do think is on all of us that build is to make the tech really robust and really good and really accessible, and to do the things people actually want it to do, so that it does become mainstream. That's certainly what we work on. So
definitely. Michelle, can you talk about what may be next with Eluvio, or are you guys working on maybe some exciting movies that you're going to put on the blockchain?
Yes. So I think, you've tapped into the essence of what we're doing as a company, which is really it is a tagline, but unlock the value of creative IP in this way. And you've heard me touch on some of the points that we're really focusing on. I think the first and most important point is to continue to scale up this idea of direct content distribution on behalf of premium brands and also independent creators that want to reach their fans. And by scale it up, I mean get it on every connected TV device, so that you can have a true streaming experience that is native for people as they own and have their libraries, and also to be able to scale that in a way that you could discover all of the projects that are doing it. You asked me an important question. How do you know where Warner Brothers is doing this? If you don't know the URL today, you wouldn't know where to go. And we are working on ways to make that universal, so you don't have to poke around or know that in advance. And then I want to talk to this point about advertising. Most of your listeners will relate to the fact that most of the content market is free and ad supported. Think about YouTube, right? So that is one of the most challenging areas because the ad markets are so gigantic, and yet there's a great opportunity with the ingredients that I've been talking about to be able to offer an alternative for those who want to have advertisement that pairs up with people that's really personalized, right? And if you think hard about, if you're a deliberate engagement, a deliberate fan of something, and you've put the effort into buying something and watching it again and again, collecting it, and being a super fan, then most likely the advertisements that can really speak to you can be personalized to what you're looking for. And there can also be an alternative for the advertiser to get out from underneath this sort of ad hoc ad buy. And I think that's an area to be very careful and delicate. At the same time, we think that, it's really the way to move the creative economy into another space. So what are we working on? Personalized ad insertion. That is a true alternative to what has been, and also allowing it to be fitted together in a nice way with the content that users can buy and own in. Doesn't mean that it's a requirement to have, but it's, I think, really important to be able to scale up and give, think about all the creators on YouTube, give them alternatives so they can, actually really monetize and scale their creative work. The last thing I would say that Eluvio is also paying lots of attention to and working hard at is being directly involved with what I would call this new type of windowing and settling payments on chain. So Warner Brothers is the first to do this. I think that this will be an ongoing approach. The movie itself carries its controls. There's no file transferring of the movie somewhere else. That's very efficient. It means that it also allows it to be reused in many different ways, right? So you can have the controls through the on-chainness. And then it also finally lets multiple companies peer together very efficiently without, again, having moved the content. So you can be a distributor over here with source content over here and share in the revenues around this. So say user goes to this publisher's website and has that content from a given studio, that studio's assets never moved over to that distributor. They're just sharing in the revenues for the fact that you came to that content through their site. And then the on-chain payments is something that we built out and you can split between parties. And that doesn't have to just apply to big studios and big streamers. It could also apply to independents who have multiple people that need to get paid. So royalties splitting directly on chain and not having to keep moving your content, having controls built in.
Yeah, that's extremely interesting. When you say royalty splitting and just payments on chain, are we talking about fiat US dollar payments? Are we talking about payments being in, does Eluvio have a token?
Yeah, so you asked such a good question. So you can have the mechanics of the chain, split payments, and then pay out however you want. And I think that's the architecture that we've taken, which is that the way that you withdraw your money can be any of the mix. It can be just standard fiat, can also be on-chain native crypto payments. And then the way we've focused is to implement the stakeholder splitting based on what's sold and what's watched, right? Because the fabric knows those things. And then as far as to answer your question, we have an utility token. And the state of tokens in the United States right now, bringing any of those things public is not quite settled down. So our token is internal, but the utility token allows for these transactions that I'm talking about to go. And it's also, I think, as we do, and we're keeping an eye like everybody else, as far as bringing that out, externalizing it, the function of that is to make all these content functions happen, not to, create a trading security, right?
Yes. And as we know, there's a lot of interesting things happening in the United States right now, and with Ripple, Coinbase, and Binance. And I'm just curious to see what's going to happen next with Coinbase, Binance, and even with the Ripple court ruling. So, we'll wait and find out. But what you guys are doing, it sounds amazing, and definitely playing it safe, which is good. It's extremely important.
It helps. In our case, we're natively a utility network doing content utility functions. So, and your question about, what does it mean for people to be able to get their royalties out? Well, two things. First, the contract can compute them, and our stakeholder contract does that. And then, as you know, you got to go through the heavy lifting of building a gateway layer that allows people to withdraw their monies. And that's where I think a multiplicity of forms, that's what we've done. We support multiple types of payments and multiple types of withdrawals is the way to go in a practical world, right? But that is the case when you get into those payments gateways of you've got an on-chain settlement, and then you have a can be off-chain payout, right?
Cool. Well, we are going to wrap things up. Michelle, I could ask you a million more questions because this is so interesting and I enjoy speaking with you. But do you have any final thoughts that you want our listeners to know before we end the interview?
I love the fact that you are really thinking about bringing media to people this way. I think that's the future that we're after. And I also think that for blockchain, as we get more into these kinds of applications, it really elevates and lifts the technology to Internet 3 status, which is what I think it's really for. And we'll love to have you continue to follow us. As far as I know, there will be more movies coming. So we'll keep that in front of yours. And then also, thank you so much for talking with me.
Of course, Michelle. And then if our listeners want to get in touch with you, do you use Twitter or LinkedIn, or how could they do that?
So we have the Eluvio Inc. Twitter, and then myself, ELV Michelle on Twitter is great. And then we also use LinkedIn. And then finally, good old-fashioned website, eluv.io.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Wonderful.
Thank you. Special thanks to Aaron Bender for producing Web3 Deep Dive podcast. I'd also like to thank the sponsors behind Web3 Deep Dive. Finally, thanks to the listeners for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and share. I'll see you guys next time.